you were talking to a brand new SIL provider who's looking at SIL for the first time, what would be some of the lessons you would want to instill on them?
A lot of responsibility that comes with SIL.
Yeah.
So I've actually said to them, well, why don't we do it together? And so 2 SIL providers running a house. And there are plenty of ways to do that. You've just got to, 1, trust who you're working with, and 2, negotiate everything up front. So there's no, grey areas about who's responsible for what and how it can work. And that can be different in different cases. But it's a great way for a new or a small provider just to ease into SIL and learn at the same time.
Every SIL provider knows the challenges: compliance, rosters, claims. But what if you could work smarter, grow faster, and make a bigger impact? Welcome to SILosophy, where we have real conversations about what it takes to succeed in supported independent living. This podcast is powered by Tania Gomez Consulting and Resolve. Let's get into it.
Welcome to SILosophy. Today I'm joined by Stephen Fakeney from Hilltop Caring. Thanks so much for joining me today, Stephen.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So to begin with, I wanted to talk a little bit about the journey of being a SIL provider. You've been in SIL for quite a long time in quite a few organisations. To begin with, can you give us a little bit of your background and your experience inside SIL housing?
Yeah, so I guess I've been in the community sector for about 25 years now, and involved in accommodation for about 20 of those. So
wow.
Pre-NDIS, but I've also been involved in the construction side of it, working for a large not-for-profit a disability organisation. So we did do a lot of building of our own properties, and then moving into the NDIS, and I guess NDIS, SIL, SDA, and I guess seeing how it's evolved, particularly in the time that the NDIS has been around.
Well, tell us about that. How has it evolved? What has happened over the time that you have noted? Has it gotten better or worse?
Oh, that tricky question. I can't say it's got worse. It's probably got a little harder.
Right.
And I think it comes down to, when the NDIS came in, there was a lot more new providers coming into the space. And what that created was, I guess, a lot more demand, a lot more, I'll use the word competition, but it was more about choice. So there was a lot more choice, which I guess evolved into providers needing to really sell their SIL services more so. And I see that as I love competition in that respect. And I think, as we've seen, funding for SIL or for the participants in SIL has, I guess it's not grown at the same rate as the cost.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's resulted in, I guess, focusing on streamlining, on being efficient without affecting the quality of the service.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily see what we've been through as a bad thing. In fact, if I look at it from the beginning to now, there's a lot more positive things that have come from it. I think we've seen a lot more innovation, a lot more willingness for collaboration between providers, and a lot more, I guess you would say, that evolution from pre-NDIS, when there wasn't a lot of thought put into SIL in some respects. Like, it was, you were a not-for-profit or a community organisation, you ran a SIL, it was block funded. They pretty much all seem to be the same.
Yeah.
So what we've seen is a lot more homes coming into the market, and a lot more people driven by consumer demand for places that are much warmer, much more comfortable, smaller numbers, I remember the days where you could see 12 or 13 people living in the same place, that institutionalized thing. Queensland was I think Queensland was actually the first to move away from institutionalization, so it wasn't a new thing. Even just before the NDIS, Queensland was already moving away from it. And I remember there used to be a saying out there back then, which was 4 beds or less. And that's when that came into the space. There are always challenges, but I think in the actual delivery of SIL, it's got better.
Yeah, there does seem to be quite a lot of innovation happening in the space, and maybe you're right. Maybe it is being driven by the tight margins.
Yeah.
For new SIL providers, I often hear that they feel that SIL has all of this money, but actually there's quite tight margins to deliver 24-hour care every single 24 hours. How do you balance that? So you're the CEO at Hilltop Caring. As the CEO, your role is obviously to make that all viable. How do you balance the needs versus the money you have to spend on supports or care?
I think we've actually been talking about this for quite a while now. It comes down to sometimes you have to sort of be selective of the ventures that you get into. So yes, it is tight margins. One of the things that affects SIL operations more than anything are vacancies.
Yeah.
And I guess, if you think about it, you get a 1 to 3 SIL property, your first participant might go into that property. That means that you're only being paid a third of the hourly rate. So the vacancy issue is probably where the hardest thing is. So I think as an organisation, we're constantly looking at any vacancies that we might have, and we're balancing that out with the number of, homes that are full. So it's, that risk factor. So we can wear some of that risk, but it doesn't leave a lot left over.
Yeah.
And I guess the other downside of a SIL in some respects is a lot of things pop up. When you're looking after people 24/7 and making sure they have everything they need, there's going to be a lot of hours that go into that are, unfunded hours. Unlike, say, community access where, you work an hour, you get paid an hour.
Yeah.
So I guess they're all just elements that you have to consider. So we try to keep our number of homes balanced between those that might have a vacancy and those that don't, to try and make sure that the funding is stable.
What would you say is your biggest challenge as a SIL provider?
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's exclusively as a SIL provider, but I think obviously managing the cost of our back office as such is always a challenge, because as you grow, you need more resources. And obviously they're unfunded resources, so therefore that all comes out of your bottom line. So I think that challenge is always about efficiency. Systems are really important. And the reality is, and it was something I was thinking of before coming here, is when it comes to those challenges, at the moment, the NDIS is a highly bureaucratic system. So whether it's us or people that we talk to, they're spending half of their day dealing with the NDIS, so on the phone, waiting on hold, trying to get clarification. And if you think about that in terms of wasted time, that time could be spent actually working directly for the participants. But unfortunately, the bureaucracy behind it means that we're spending a lot of time chasing things that just aren't right. And, sometimes that can become a bit overwhelming, but then one of the biggest areas where that seems to affect is support coordinators, because they're obviously directly involved.
Yeah.
And, you know, every support coordinator we talk to is spending half to three quarters of their day on the phone to the NDIA.
Yeah.
So I think the bureaucracy is probably one of the biggest challenges. And but I think one of the positives has been that what the NDIS has allowed up till now is that ability for choice. So what I mean by that is we see all these big organisations that are out there, but I think what keeps those larger organisations very, to some degree, innovative and staying on top of things is all the small and medium organisations. Without the small and medium organisations, innovation would die because it would just become the same.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we're very grateful for, is that as a medium-sized organisation, we're very grateful that we exist and that we're able to be flexible and innovative and agile, I guess, to changes that come along.
You've talked there about challenges and some of your strategies. If you were talking to a brand new SIL provider who's looking at SIL for the first time, what would be some of the lessons you would want to instill on them?
That actually is something that happens regularly. So I definitely talk to smaller organisations who are not necessarily new as an organisation, but they're new to the SIL area. And actually something that's, I guess, a new model that I actually suggest to them is collaborate with another SIL provider. So, for example, I had a small provider who I have got to know over a period of time, and they've said they would like to try SIL and get into SIL, and I believe that they're actually quite set up for it, but they are quite nervous about getting into that. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with SIL.
Yeah.
So I've actually said to them, well, why don't we do it together? And so two SIL providers running a house. And there are plenty of ways to do that. You've just got to, one, trust who you're working with, and two, negotiate everything up front. So there's no, I guess, grey areas about who's responsible for what and how it can work. And that can be different in different cases. But it's a great way for a new or a small provider just to ease into SIL and learn at the same time.
Yeah, it's a great idea. What do you think is the most rewarding aspects of being a SIL provider?
Well, that's easy. It absolutely is, because we're looking after participants and working with them 24 hours a day. We actually get to be part of their life. And that is probably the most rewarding thing. We start to see the growth that our participants are making, even on a health side, because we're involved in their medical, I guess, appointments, the therapies that they're going through, we see it every day. We see how far they come. And I have to say, because I'm one of those people that likes to see the end result and not just do a little part of it. So I think that's probably the most rewarding thing, is being involved in people's lives and taking that, very seriously. These are people we work with all day, every day.
Yeah.
And I just, it's probably the most exciting thing about the industry.
Now, there's going to be a lot of changes in 2025 when it comes to SIL providers. What is your crystal ball, thoughts about what might happen in 2025?
The crystal ball. Look, there are lots of changes or things that have been discussed, such as, I guess, the NDIS commission, unannounced visits to SIL homes, to things like that. That side of it, I think, is fantastic. I actually have no problem with that. There are we know that if someone pops into a house unannounced, it's not going to be a problem. I think we need to prepare our staff so that they don't have an anxiety attack when someone knocks on the door. But the homes are just are pretty much ready to go. I am a little concerned about the aspect of some participants actually won't cope with unannounced visits. So just due to the disability or their mental health conditions, someone arriving unannounced will cause them great distress. So in those cases, I am concerned. In terms of being ready for those, I believe we're ready every day. So, and look, I don't expect everything to be always 100%, but I believe we can deal with that. I'm quite interested to see what happens around the discussion around SDA, or the invention or creation of this new category that's not SDA, not pure SIL, because I think there's a lot of people who miss out. And the reality is we are in a crazy housing crisis. So anything that helps people find a home will be a positive. Look, we're hearing about all these things that potentially will happen. The reality is it's being implemented by a bureaucracy. So I think it's going to take time. And I think one thing, the longer you're in this sector, the more you learn to not worry about things. Just prepare the best you can and be flexible. Because if you don't go with the change, you will burn out and leave the industry. And we really don't want to see more of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think how you manage change is very important, especially in 2025 when we've been told there's many changes coming. You can't fight the change. It doesn't matter what you think, it's coming regardless. So you just need to be prepared. And you talked about, not being worried about things like unannounced audits and or visits, and that you're ready every day. What have you put in place in your organisation to help you feel confident that you're audit ready at any point in time?
I would say that from a SIL perspective, for those sorts of things, I think one of the things is I have no doubt that it's never going to be 100% perfect. I'm sure there's things that they will find, but I'm okay with that because that's just a learning. But I guess it's the structure that we've built. So, we have regular planned at the moment, but regular drop-ins to our houses. We've built just simple checklists for our coordinators that aren't in the house on a day-to-day basis. So they can go in, each week they'll go and visit the house. They'll make sure everything's in place, that the paperwork's being filled out correctly. They'll do any training that's required, and that's happening on a regular basis. There's a lot of things we'd like to do and we are working on, and I've got some, plans for early next year to look at more automation and digitization so that we can, have more real-time monitoring. So we are working on that so that it doesn't always require physical paper. So we obviously reduce the paper as much as possible because those things get missed. We know that there are some things that will always be in a home on paper, but part of our current visits to the houses includes our coordinators. It might be a very simple thing, but we've formed a very basic checklist using a simple piece of software that's called Safety Culture, which allows on each question you to take photos, to add anything you need. So we're getting constant feedback, in the office as such. and visually seeing if there's any challenges in the houses, if things need to be fixed, if we're doing something badly, how do we make it better? But I think it's just having that constant oversight.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things that I think has helped us is we work with a philosophy of empowering staff. So staff don't have to get permission for every decision they make. There's a scope of decisions that they can make themselves. And when you empower people to make those decisions, they tend to run with it in a good way, and they understand the processes better. They want things to be better. They feed back things they think can be better. So I just think, and I guess we will all agree that there should never be a situation where micromanaging is necessary. So it's about training your staff to make those decisions, because that also helps with resources.
Yeah.
If they're not ringing a supervisor or a coordinator 10 times a day, that's also freeing up more time. So I just think all those little elements help towards being ready.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. We talked a little bit about the future of SIL. We've talked about why you do SIL, some of the challenges in SIL, and a bit of the future goals. Is there anything else you think that is important for SIL providers to think about on their journey as a SIL provider?
I think it's absolutely imperative these days to think of other providers as opportunities, not sort of like you're just your competition. We use the word competition, but we don't necessarily think of it in the traditional way. So we're not out there trying to grab business or anything like that. We're very, very open. But I think collaborating with other providers is extremely important.
Yeah.
Even in the simplest way. In a SIL, for example, we encourage our participants to have a second provider for their community access, because we believe having more providers involved is going to make us all better.
Yeah.
So that's on a simple level. But as I gave that example of two SIL providers collaborating on a house, I think there needs to be more of that. It helps everyone. It helps people with vacancies. It helps people learn from each other. It reduces risk for each organisation. It gives you a larger pool of staff. I mean, there are so many benefits to those sorts of things. But I think, get out there, talk to other providers, attend events, meet people. Like we go to coffee catch-ups with people all the time. We have the collective, which is a great way to learn. I'm sure we'll get to that. But it is just really about working with other people and learning. And don't keep it all local. Like, I talked to a provider in Sydney and in the mid-north coast of New South Wales as well, and we're in Queensland. So it's good to look at what's happening in other spaces as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's been really interesting to hear from today, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining us. Lastly, if someone wanted to reach out to you to have a further chat, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Well, that's a good question. They can just Google Hilltop Caring. We're on every platform. I'm on LinkedIn. The organisation's on LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram.
All of the socials.
We're pretty much on all socials. We're just sort of getting used to TikTok at the moment, but we're having a bit of fun with it. So it's been great. So contact the office, contact me. I'm definitely on LinkedIn, so I'm available. Happy to chat to anybody.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's a wrap on this episode of SILosophy. If this resonated with you, take a second to subscribe and share it with someone in the SIL space who really needs to hear this. Don't forget to connect with Tania Gomez Consulting on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook for more resources, conversations, and support to help you grow your impact. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep making a difference.